the recording. And then we are live streaming on YouTube. And let me look over to make sure it's up and running. Okay, we are now up on YouTube. We are live and ready to go.
In that case, it is 10:01 a.m. And I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Board of Directors of Friday, September the 23rd, 2022. Before we start, please note this meeting is live streamed on YouTube, as Secretary Ko-Wong just said, and recorded. Members of the public are encouraged to watch and listen to this meeting on YouTube or by dialing into 415-569-6446. And I'll repeat that number in a moment. So keep your pencil and paper handy. For the audio of this meeting, if you would like to provide public comment at today's meeting and have not done so already, please call 415-569-6446. And let the facilitator know you would like to provide public comment. I appreciate everyone's patience as we get through today's meeting. Madam Secretary, the roll, please.
All right, thank you and good morning, everyone. Start with Director Arnold.
Here.
Director Conroy.
Present.
Director Garbarino.
Present.
Director Giudice is absent. Director Grosball.
Here.
Director Hernandez.
Here.
Director Maston.
Here.
Director Parr. Director Parr is not here yet. Director Rabbit.
Here.
Director Rodoni.
Here.
Director Snyder.
Here.
Director Stephanie.
Here.
Director Thier. Director
Here.
Thier. Thank you. Second Vice President Hill.
Here.
First Vice President Cochran.
Here.
And President Tirio.
Here.
Thank you.
Not to rat her out, but Director Parr had a cat chasing assignment. So, she may be with us as soon as the cat is in the bag.
Thank you. I'll keep an eye out for her in
Very
case
good.
she or her cat show up.
Okay.
Dennis Mulligan, I'll confirm staff.
Present.
Joe Wire.
Yes.
Thank you. Ava Barr Furbish.
Present.
Kim Manolius.
Morning.
Thank you. Morning. Dave Rivera.
Good morning, Present.
Mona Babauta. I see Mona. Hi. Kelly Hopper.
Present.
Jim Swindler is absent. Thank you very much. That confirms staff on the line.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us this morning. And please be patient. We appreciate your patience as we get through today's agenda. I'd like to remind my colleagues to mute their microphones and remember to unmute when we open up for directors discussion. If we have directors calling in by phone, and we may, I guess we do, no, maybe not. Please use your mute button or *6 to unmute yourself. I'll ask for any questions or comments on items on the agenda items as we proceed. Click on the raise hand function on your device if you have a question, or press *9 for the raise hand function if joining by phone. And I'll try to keep an eye open for physical hands raised if that isn't working. If there are any questions, the Secretary or I will call on you accordingly. If we missed your raised hand, please speak up. Following any discussion, we'll take the appropriate roll call vote. If you are not speaking, please remember to mute your phones to minimize the background noise on today's meeting. Please follow along by referring to the page numbers located on the bottom right-hand corner of your meeting packet. Director Arnold, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes, thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Secretary, you've taken away half my screen. Let me. There we go. I'm back. All right. Before we move, thank you, Director Arnold. Before we move on to public comment under item 4, Madam Secretary, we were at 7. How many do we have now for public comment?
We're still currently at 7, but a few people might have joined now since we started the meeting. So after the 7, I believe Justine's going to ask for a little bit of time to poll to see if there's any other speakers.
So it appears that we can give a full 3 minutes to those who are wishing to comment and still be in within our half-hour standard time span for public comment. Madam Secretary, please move along, or Ms. Bach, would you please start us on public comment?
Certainly. Good morning. Our first speaker this morning is Kimberly Renee Gamboa. Kimberly Renee.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Kimberly. My name is Kimberly Renee Gamboa. Okay. My name is Kimberly Renee Gamboa, and I am holding one of my favorite photos of my 18-year-old son, Kyle Emerson Gamboa, smiling ear to ear in his high school class picture. Kyle jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge on September 20th, 2013 at 11:45 a.m. This past Tuesday was the 9-year anniversary of our son's death. We come to the Golden Gate Bridge every year on Kyle's anniversary to honor Kyle. This year, I was so overwhelmed to see the net had been installed under light post 77 where Kyle had jumped. It was so unexpected because I didn't think the net would be at his location until next year. I cannot describe the emotions I felt and still feel seeing a net where Kyle jumped. All the possibilities to save Kyle if the net had been there when he jumped, and the future possibilities of all the lives that will be saved. Thank you to all of you, all the staff that works on the Golden Gate Bridge, and the construction workers that continue to work on the suicide deterrent. None of this would be possible without all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gamboa. Many of us remember that photograph quite well. Ms. Bach, the next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Dave Rohde. Mr. Rohde? Mr. Rohde, go ahead, please.
Good morning. My name is Dave Rohde. I'm with the Climate Reality Project. In my role as a climate reality leader, I have to stay informed. I read books that will make you cringe, like David Wallace Wells' The Uninhabitable Earth, and books that are filled with hope, like Paul Hawkins' Regeneration, Ending the Climate Crisis in One Generation. What I've learned from the dozens of books and hundreds of articles and research papers that I've read is that we got to stay focused on what's in front of us to get what's possible and to find a way to get there as fast as we can. Neither you or I can do anything about the climate catastrophes that are already unfolding around the world. But we can focus on achieving net zero emissions here in California. So in August, when the International Council on Clean Transportation released a paper calling on California to cap food-based biofuels, we helped publicize it. And after ICCT scientists met with CARB to address biofuel caps, we helped them set up and promote a webinar to discuss it. As you know, biofuels like renewable diesel that you use are part of CARB's low carbon fuel standard, but it has created so many incentives that California is leading the entire rest of the nation in its production. The Phillips 66 Rodeo plant alone plans to produce 1 billion gallons a year of biofuel. The majority of that biofuel will be made from crops like soy, corn, and canola. Croplands the size of the entire state of Indiana will be needed just to grow the feedstocks Phillips 66 needs for its 1 billion gallons a year of biofuel. So you can see there's a real link between your biofuel use and the impact on escalating food prices and on global food scarcity. When ICCT met with CARB, they were assured that California's future is electric. In light of the ICCT research, CARB is reassessing its low-carbon fuel standards and plans to study biofuel feedstock alternatives that aren't food-based. But for now, biofuel refineries will be importing crops from Midwest farms, crops that should be food instead of fuel. So where does that leave the Golden Gate Bridge District? Every delay in your transition to electric buses and ferries counts. The state of California wants you to go electric. The federal government wants you to go electric. The people suffering the consequences of the Rodeo refinery fumes want you to go electric. Every environmentalist in California wants you to go electric. I know you need funding to transition to electric, but you know it's coming. So my question is, have you begun that planning? As Director Parr pointed out at a recent board meeting, you have the ability to drive the market. If you begin planning for electric buses and share that information with bus manufacturers, they'll be ready for you when the money comes through. If you stay on top of the future of electric ferries and you begin to plan the charging infrastructure you need, you can be ready for the big, fast electric ferries that are already in the planning. But there is no time to waste. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing any reports suggesting you've begun to plan. So I ask you, have you begun to plan your transition to an all-electric transit system? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rodi. Ms. Bach, the next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Mauricio Bonaccini. Mauricio?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mauricio Bonaccini. I'm a physician and I live in San Francisco. My comments have to do with the relationship between bicycles and cars after the Golden Gate Bridge, which I understand is at the jurisdiction of this board. I know that the most dangerous intersection in Marin is between Alexander, at the junction of Alexander and Bunker Road, and I feel that probably there the most logical solution would be to create basically a light system, a red light. But I wanted to bring to the board and to the board's attention also 3 other places that I think are fairly dangerous for cyclists. One is the juncture of Councilman and Alexander. I know there is a stop sign, and I do acknowledge that sometimes cyclists don't follow that. I think something should be done in terms of signage, perhaps for cars going onto the freeway to warn them there are bicycles around. My second location that I want to bring to the board's attention is the tunnel. The tunnel going southward, there is a sign, do not pass, but there is no sign going to the tunnel going northbound into Sausalito. So I would suggest that also signage will be fairly simple to implement to make sure that there is no cars don't pass bicycles in the tunnel, also because it's very dark in there. The other place that I think it's a problem is the double stop sign right after the tunnel. Basically, the northbound Sausalito exit doesn't have any slow down signs, and yet there are cars and lots of bicycles that go northbound into Sausalito. There are 2 stop signs. So I don't know, something could be done there to improve the situation. Perhaps also actually a light system would be the solution there. So these are the 3 points I wanted to bring up to the board, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bonaccini. Madam Bach, Ms. Bach, next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is David Pilpel. David, go ahead.
Great. Thank you, David Pilpel. So I have really nothing new today, but I did want to just refer back to the comments I made yesterday regarding the budget status, the fiscal cliff, the need for a strategic financial plan, having maps and photos in staff reports, the excellent remote meetings, including this, and the ability of the public to participate, the status of the state law on the Brown Act, the continued prevalence of COVID, and finally the new Ken Burns film this week and what it says to all of us. That's a summary of my comments from yesterday. Thanks again for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Pilpel. Ms. Bach, the next speaker, please.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Shane Weinstein. Shane, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Awesome. Good morning, Chair Terrio and his fellow director, Shane Weinstein, president of all the bus operators, retired and active. Just a very quick second to commend you, Mr. Chair, on being present at all these meetings. It can't be easy, but you're making it look so thank you. Directors, I'm calling this morning as I have in the past with a red flag in the air, smoke signals, and anything else to draw attention. Please hear me. We have 167 bus operators among our ranks today. That is the lowest rate since the merger of Greyhound and Golden Gate Transit. I'm calling this morning because this number of bus operators is at a historic low with no relief in sight. Since the last time we've called, we've lost another 10 to 15 operators. We need help. Graduating 4 to 5 people per class and only having 3 to 4 classes per year is not going to cut it. We're losing far more than we are gaining, and if we continue at this rate, the public will continue to suffer more and more. I implore you, directors, please look into the issue of not being able to hire bus operators, and why is it that so many people are leaving Golden Gate Transit? This never used to happen. Is it the hourly pay that's keeping prospective operators away, as we're the lowest hourly bus operators at any major transit agency in the Bay Area? Is it the working conditions? Is it the lack of breaks? Is it the rise in injuries due to increased work? Is it the leadership? Something needs to change. Speaking of change, I saw that come October 3rd, there'll be an increased service on the ferry, 2 northbound and 1 southbound PM trips. This is awesome. This is awesome. What this tells me is there must be some increased traffic in the financial district to create these new trips. This is good for the Golden Gate Bridge, and it's also great for the public. I also saw that now Smart Train is going to sync up with the ferry schedule. Again, this is great. It's great for the Golden Gate Bridge. It's great for the public. This really seems like a huge push by both the district and Smart to make it more convenient to get to the ferry, which again, I applaud. What I'm not seeing from the district is any sort of commute service to make it more convenient for those that either don't ride the Smart Train nor the ferry, or moreover, simply can't afford it. Where is the 24 from Fairfax down Sir Francis Drake to the city? These people are waiting in San Anselmo. These people are waiting in Greenbrae. We have literally stripped the ability of anybody in Greenway to even get to the freeway to grab a bus. There is literally no way. So while the Smart Train and the ferry are getting more convenient, the bus keeps getting more and more difficult for the public to depend on. We're literally making people walk a half mile in hot and cold conditions when we can simply put a bus out there. I implore you, please look into the 24 route. We need it. The public needs it. We can do it. Let's get it back on the road. I ask that you simply look into what the problem is for hiring and retention. And as I said, these are the lowest number of bus operators we've had in 50 years. There's no apprenticeship program that will fill these voids. We need an aggressive push by the to get bus operators hired, because the public is who is suffering without the bus. And please, as I leave you, directors, and as Mr. Mulligan reports, we're only carrying 39% of pre-pandemic levels. We are also only putting out 50% of pre-pandemic service. So Mr. Mulligan, don't compare apples and oranges. Fair is fair when reporting to the board. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Weinstein. I'm doing okay, by the way. Ms. Bach, the next speaker.
Our next speaker is Denise Lieber. Denise, go ahead. Denise Lieber. Okay, maybe we can come back to her. Warren Wells. Warren, please go ahead.
This is Warren Wells, Policy and Planning Director for the Marin County Bicycle Coalition. I'm calling to follow up about the report from last month showing Alexander Avenue as being home to the 2 most dangerous intersections for bicyclists in Marin County. After crossing the bridge, Alexander is effectively the gateway into Marin. There's no way to get to Sausalito without traveling on it. And this seems like a far cry from how we should be welcoming people to the North Bay, at least those who travel by bicycle or by foot. The 2 intersections identified in the report are the intersection with Bunker Road, the road that travels to the tunnel, and East Road, which travels down to Fort Baker. After reviewing the crash data from the California State Crash Reporting Database, it appears that the large share of the collisions occur between through-riding bicyclists and vehicles turning in front of them. Given the high speeds possible on the downhill slopes, this is a significant threat to rider safety. Threats like this are addressable by changes to the street design, which would save people the pain and inconvenience of crashes on a roadway that the Golden Gate Bridge District manages. But the only way to fix the problem is to admit that you have one. There's a growing trend of agencies across the country adopting a Vision Zero goal, also called a safe systems approach. This is the view that serious injuries and fatalities are not inevitable, but are avoidable, and that no one's life should be lost just by trying to use our transportation system. Such a safe systems approach has been adopted by the U.S. Department of Transportation, the California Department of Transportation, the City of San Francisco, and now the County of Marin. Indeed, the Bridge District is surrounded by agencies that have taken this important step to clearly state that even one death is too many, commitments that the district has clearly made with the suicide deterrent system. I urge the Bridge District to make this policy commitment, which doesn't cost anything yet, but would help guide policy when funding is identified for the much needed infrastructure changes on Alexander Avenue. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. And when we get to the director's report, I may have a question or two there to the general manager's report as well. Do we have Ms. Lieber back, Ms. Bach?
Let's find out. Denise Lieber? I am not hearing her, but if you would indulge me, I would like to just poll the room quickly as we had a few more people jump on. President Terrio, would that be all right with you?
Yes, please.
Thank you. We have no more speakers this morning.
Very good. General Manager Mulligan, there's a lot there to talk about if you want to talk about it.
Sure, I'll talk about a little bit of it. And then I think all the speakers other than Mauricio know how to contact me if they want to follow up. First, to Ms. Kimberly Renee Gamboa, I want to thank you for your tireless advocacy these 9 years since Kyle jumped. And I'm just so thrilled that light pole 77 has a net beneath it today as we speak. That's a recent development. The contractor is increasing the rate of spreading the net, and we share in the emotions and joy associated with that. To Mr. David Rohde, we're a public agency that operates in a rule-bound world from CARB, the Federal Transit Administration, and others, but we are committed to a zero-emission future. We follow CARB's guidance with respect to what fuels we use for those diesel engines that we have in our fleet or diesel hybrids. But we have begun the planning for our transition to that zero-emission future. We presented publicly a zero-emission bus plan. There's other work going on behind the scenes. Bus manufacturers are ready. There's 2 new bus manufacturers in the space for transit buses, Proterra and BYD, that make fully electric buses. All the traditional manufacturers now also provide full electric buses. The technology is evolving rapidly. And also on the ferry side, at an upcoming Building and Operating Committee meeting, we will have a presentation on zero-emission ferries in the state-of-the-art worldwide by our ferry division's engineering and maintenance manager, Mr. Mike Hoffman. So that'll be an upcoming meeting. It will be at a B&O meeting, so we'll make sure, Mr. Rohde, that you're aware of when that occurs so you can participate in that. To Mauricio, thank you for highlighting the issues that were in that recent press report in the study done by the law firm. We are going to work with our Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee to study the possible solutions at these locations. Please know that a couple of locations you highlighted are outside of our jurisdiction. It's really complicated. We don't own any land here, but we have a permit from the federal government to use portions of it. But the tunnel is Caltrans and National Park Service, not the Bridge District. The intersection when you come off northbound, where there's a free right turn to go down Alexander Avenue, is not our property either. That's also Caltrans and the Park Service. But we will be having meetings with them as we have in the past about potential changes. The stop signs they put in a few years ago where cars exiting northbound could not make a left turn free, they have to come to complete stop, was a welcome and needed change, but there's a lot more we can do in that area. So we look forward to working with the advocates. And that dovetails or is a segue to Mr. Warren Wells. Mr. Warren Wells applied to join our Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee. We look forward to working with him and the other interested parties and advocates that have filled out applications as we review the areas around the bridge as one of our first orders of work. We are committed to saving lives. It's who the Bridge District is, whether it's building a public safety railing on our sidewalks, which didn't exist across the full length of the bridge 20 years ago, whether building a movable median barrier or now a suicide barrier. So that is who the board is, and staff represents those values. To Mr. Shane Weinstein, we are in the process of trying to increase our hiring. To remind the board, for 2 years, we had a hard hiring freeze. We had issued layoff notices. We went through some tough times, so we have a lot of catching up to do. I want to thank Mr. Shane Weinstein and Local 1575 for partnering with Mona Babauta and our bus division in California Transit Works, the College of Marin, and Santa Rosa Community College for an innovative program to bring young people into pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs to become bus operators. It's a very creative approach, and I'm grateful for that. With respect to ridership, I will talk about that under my general manager's report. That's a broader issue. And for Mr. David Pilpel, we will be bringing to our finance committee next month 5-year financial projections to show what our future looks like. Mr. Wire, our auditor controller, CFO, and his team have been working on that, and they'll have information that will be publicly presented next month. And that concludes my responses to all the speakers, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mulligan. Madam Secretary, thank you to the public also overall for their comments. Madam Secretary, the next item on the agenda, please.
Thank you. We're going to move on to item 5 to approve the consent calendar, including approval of minutes from the committee and board meetings in August, as well as ratification of actions by the auditor controller. The consent calendar is located on pages 5 to 39 of your packet. And I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. Before we take our vote, are there questions from board members on the consent calendar? I'm seeing none. Madam Secretary, are you seeing any?
I'm seeing none.
I will make one comment. The minutes of the last board meeting showed that I voted to approve the minutes of the July meetings, which I didn't attend. That would not under prior circumstances have been appropriate, but I want to assure everybody that prior to the August meetings, I listened to every one of those and watched every one of those meetings on YouTube. So I'm well aware of what went on in them and knew before I took my vote. So is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Mr. President, I'll move that forward.
There's a motion, and I thought I heard a second in there. Did you catch?
Second.
I did.
For sure. Okay. Then, Madam Secretary, a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. We're voting on item number 5 to approve the consent calendar with the first and second, starting with Director Arnold,
Aye.
Director Conroy,
Aye.
Director Garbarino,
Aye.
Director Giudice is absent, Director Grosboll,
Aye.
Director Hernandez,
Aye.
Director Maston,
Aye.
Director Parr,
Aye.
thank you, Director Rabbit,
Aye.
Director Rodoni,
Aye.
Director Snyder,
Aye.
Director Stephanie,
Aye.
Director Thier,
Aye.
Second Vice President Hill,
Yes.
First Vice President Cochran,
Yes.
and President Tirio.
Yes.
Thank you. You have 15 ayes.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. The motion then passes. The next item, please.
We're going to move on to item 6A, which brings Dennis back into the forefront. This is report of the general manager, and that staff report can be found on pages 41 to 49 of your packet. Dennis, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, members of the board, members of the public. My written report is before you. I will highlight a couple of items in the report and expand upon a few, one in particular based on public comment. First off, I want to recognize some staff. The California Highway Patrol recently sent letters of accommodation to the district for several of our staff who were involved in a very challenging event that occurred on Thursday, July 14th. The CHP requested assistance from the district. They were dealing with a possibly armed suspect at the Vista Point parking lot. The employees who received letters of accommodation are Lieutenant Hector Bao, Roadway Services Technician Jeremy Owens, Chief of Roadway Services Bill San Gregory, Roadway Services Technician Supervisor Jesus Rodriguez, Roadway Services Technician Patrick Farrell, Roadway Services Technician Anthony D'Amico, Patrol Officer Miguel Torres, Patrol Officer Kevin Horn, and Patrol Officer Fabian Benjamin. This was a very, very fluid situation. Our employees handled it with tact, professionalism, a calm demeanor, and with due regard for the public and employee safety of all those in the vicinity. The CHP sent these individuals letters, and I just wanted to publicly acknowledge and state for the record that they did a fabulous job, and we're very proud of them. With respect to the pandemic is still impacting our operations. Recreational and tourism travel has bounced much faster than commute travel. So afternoon ferry trips out of Sausalito, Giants Ballpark ferry service, and Angel Island services are quite popular, particularly when there's great weather. Commute service is bouncing back much slower. Currently in downtown San Francisco, over 20% of all office space is unleased. So if you look at a high rise, 1 out of every 5 floors, more than 1 out of every 5 floors, has no tenant with a signed lease. The other 4 floors are marginally occupied, even though a lease is in place. Many of those employers are trying to get out of their leases. So there has not been yet a robust return of commuters, and that's reflected in bridge, bus, and ferry. While Mr. Weinstein said that we haven't had this small a service level since we took over the bus service from Greyhound, it's important to note that we haven't had this low a customer demand for our service since well before we took over the service from Greyhound. There is no customer demand in significant amounts for our service. Bridge service, people driving across the bridge Monday through Friday, 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. is down 30%. Ferry service is down about 50%. Bus service is down 60%. So only 40% of the ridership we carried previously is riding today. Less than half the people getting on a bus today compared to before the pandemic. And when you break down our bus service, it's quite telling. We offer 2 types of bus service, regional bus service and commute service. And before the pandemic, about half of the hours of bus service that the district operated were regional, and the other half were commute. Regional service is the buses that go up and down the 101 corridor about 23 hours a day from Santa Rosa to San Francisco, and then across the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge from the Del Norte BART station to the San Rafael Transit Center. Our regional routes are the Route 101, 130, 150, and 580. Today, our regional ridership on those bus routes is about 80% of pre-pandemic levels. If we take out the local riders, before and after the pandemic, we're carrying 90% of our regional riders on those routes. The commute routes, though, is a different story. The commute routes are those express buses that leave a neighborhood like the Route 4 or the Route 24 or the 72, and they make a handful of stops, and then they go down express to downtown San Francisco. Our commute ridership is down. Today, we're carrying less than 20% of our commute ridership. If we take out the local riders, which I'll come back to in a minute, today our commute ridership is 12% of the pre-pandemic level. So the people using our buses are, to a large extent, on the regional routes, and to a much, much, much lesser extent, the commute routes. Larkspur ferry service, before the pandemic, we had 42 trips a day between Larkspur and San Francisco. Today, we have 22 trips a day on a weekday between Larkspur and San Francisco. So we're going to add 2 trips, and 2 trips is great because we're seeing, some ferry boats almost sell out. But we're adding service back in response to customer demand. We're taking in $1 million less each week in bridge tolls and transit fares, and the lion's share of that is bridge tolls. So we're spending one-time federal COVID relief money, and so we're adding service back in a prudent fashion to make that one-time federal COVID relief money last as long as possible. Going back to our bus service, I might add that we started picking up and dropping off people within San Francisco during the pandemic. And but for that, our numbers would be much less. While we say our ridership is down 40%, down 60%, and we're only carrying 40% of our ridership compared to pre-pandemic, it's important to note that people riding our buses today, half are local riders. If you ride our Route 114, which is a Route 4, the bus only has a few people on it when it leaves Marin County crossing the bridge. Then when it gets to San Francisco, people hop on the bus. We can have 20 people get on the bus at Lombard and Fillmore. We can have 15 people get on at Chestnut and Van Ness. So half of our ridership is locals. We're not seeing significant travel from the North Bay into San Francisco during the commute period. As people come back, as average occupancy, or the seats are filling up on buses and ferries, we're adding service. We've been doing that since the start of the pandemic, and we continue to do that today. Today, ferry ridership is growing a little faster than bus ridership, and so we're adding a little more service back because we don't want to leave anyone behind. But at this juncture, there's no danger of leaving any commute bus customer behind at a bus stop in Marin. And we're fortunate that in San Francisco, people are choosing to ride our buses because they're fast and convenient rides from the Marina neighborhood to the financial district, as well as from the Van Ness corridor to the financial district. So that addresses the regional ridership. I now want to talk briefly about accommodations in our employees. I started off with that, so I'll end with that. We have 3 employees being recognized for their tenure with the district. First is Chuck Vong. Chuck Vong has been with the district for 25 years. He is a supervising civil engineer in the engineering department, and he's an extremely talented individual who celebrated his 25th anniversary on September 8th. Von Hong is a bus operator who celebrated his 25th anniversary on September 6th. And then Johnny Winata celebrated his 25th anniversary also on September 6th. So kudos to them. For the Employee of the Month, after reviewing nominations submitted by district employees, the Employee of the Month Committee, which is comprised of employees, not managers, selected Senior Capital and Grant Program Analyst Jacob Brown to be the Employee of the Month for August of 2022. Mr. Brown is recognized for his role leading the district's triennial review process for the first time this year. The triennial review refers to something that the FTA does every 3 years to people they give money to. They come in and they look through your processes, your procedures, and to make sure that you're complying with all federal requirements, rules, and regulations. It's a very invasive process touching almost every facet of the district. And Jacob herded the cats, that's all of us, to make sure that we were responsive to all the information requests from the auditors from FTA, and that we had productive meetings and engagement with them so that we had a favorable outcome. His colleagues note that he approaches his work with a people-first mentality. He builds positive professional working relationships, and people enjoy working with him tremendously. He is a San Francisco resident since 2018. He and his wife and their young child enjoy San Francisco and various activities. And that concludes my report. I'm available to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Mulligan. Are there directors with questions for Mr. Mulligan? I'm not seeing any hands. Madam Secretary, I'm going to ask you again. Any hands out there?
I see no raised hands.
I do have a couple of small follow-ups. Are you ready to talk about where we actually stand with regard to the formation of the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, Mr. Mulligan?
Yes, I am. We did some outreach and we got a handful of applications early on, but we wanted to have a larger group. And so we did another round of outreach. We now have 14 applications. And so we will be reaching out to them next week to let all 14 know that they're welcome. And we encourage them to follow up and join the Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Then we'll be looping back with those individuals to calendar our first meeting.
Very good. Thank you. I will remark also that we have, among small groups of us, had sort of preliminary informal conversations about Vision Zero. I do promise Mr. Wells I will contact him because I have a number of questions. So for some more informal preliminary discussions. So we're thinking about that too. Anything else, Mr. Mulligan?
Nothing, Mr. President.
Okay, then, Madam Secretary, let's move along to the next item on the agenda.
Thank you. We're moving on to item 6B on the report of the attorney, Kim Manolius' staff report, and that can be found on page 51 of your packet. And Kim is here to present his report. Kim, go ahead.
Morning, everyone. As Amaret said, my written reports before you. Happy to take any questions. And good news, there's no closed session today.
Are there questions for Mr. Manolius? I see none. I'm going to assume you see none as well, Madam Secretary.
That's correct. I see none.
Then the next item, please.
Thank you. We're going to move on to item 6C, and that's the report of the chief engineer. That report can be found in the Building and Operating Committee meeting packet as agenda item number 6. Ava Bauer-Furbish is here to present her report. And Ava, I'm going to have you go ahead and kick things off so I can follow your lead.
Thank you, Amaret. Mr. President, members of the board, my written report is before you, and I would like to highlight today 2 projects. First project is the suicide deterrent under construction. And Amaret, could you please bring up the photos? So these photographs are attached to my report. And I would like to show, first of all, how the installation of the net is done. In mid of August, the contractor began. Can you please go to 6?
You're breaking up. Madam Secretary, she's frozen. Do we?
Oh, yeah,
there
thank
she goes.
you. So in mid-August, the contractor began installation of the net. Uh-oh.
That's okay. Ava, try turning off your video and seeing if that
Okay.
will improve.
Sure. All right. Can you hear me now?
Much better.
Okay, great. Thank you. So in mid of August, the contractor began installation of the net on span 4 of the suspension bridge, which is the north portion, north half of the main span of the suspension bridge. And they begin on both east and west sides. And the way this is done, you can see in this photograph that the net is actually brought to the site on a spool. And then it's installed into an apparatus that it's called a spooler, which is then supported on a platform that rolls on the newly installed site traveler rail. So in this photograph, you see basically the beginning of the installation of the net. The net is unfolded, unrolled, and it's done with its gravity and with some brakes to make sure that the progression is controlled. Can we go to slide 64, please? Thank you. So workers have to temporarily spread the net between what we call border cables. And you see these two workers attaching the net to the exterior border cable with temporary straps. Can we go to 65 then? Thank you. I really like this photo. I think it's very artistic. You can see from the distance that the workers work on the along the exterior border cable, and this is just to give you a perspective how this is temporarily attached to the border cable. And the crew consists usually at this location of 6 to 7 workers. Can we go to 66, please? As you can see, when the net is spread and attached to the border cables, it happens on both sides, both next to the truss, and you can see workers there, 3 of them, working to attach the net to the so-called interior border cable, and then 2 workers on the platform along the exterior border cable. In addition to span 3, on September 1st, the contractor began the similar operation in span 4, which is the south half of the suspension bridge main span. And again, it's happening both on east and west side. So with this, I'll be happy to answer any questions that the board may have in relation to the installation of the net.
Thank you, Ms. Bauer-Furbush. I was going to, as usual, point the public to your report from yesterday's Building and Operating Committee meeting and tell them to go look because there are pictures, but you've beaten me to the punch. Madams, do you have any directors with questions for Ms. Bauer-Furbush? And Madam Secretary, I don't have much of a screen here to look at, so you'll have to tell me if there's anybody with hand up.
Will do. I'm not seeing any hands, but if you even wave your hand in front of the camera, I can see that too. I'm not seeing any questions on this.
So if I may, I would like to add that you see in those photographs the early stages of the net installation, but by now the contractor has installed about 900 linear feet of the net total, and they improving the production rate. So right now they are able to install about 100 linear foot a day with this one crew. Thank you very much, Amoret. Can we move to the Santa Rosa bus facility resurfacing project? And I mentioned 2 months ago that we will bring the photographs, before and after photographs of this project. Amoret, can you go to 69, please? We marked A, B, C as the location that we will show photos of before and after. A is the entry to the bus facility lot. B is the location where buses are parked. So basically, this is the parking lot for the buses. And C is the parking lot for the passengers. 70, please. So this is a picture of the entry to the facility. And then if we go to 71, this is before. And this is after, so definitely looks much better. 72, and this is what the bus parking lot looked like before, and 73 shows it's after. And then finally, 74, this is the passenger parking lot before, and 75. And this is after. In addition to this resurfacing work and all the striping improvements, the photo number 76 shows that we made some provisions here in anticipation of the electrification of our buses. So you can see that we install new power and communication conduits for the future charging stations for the buses. And finally, 77, and this shows the location of new junction boxes for the charging stations. So this concludes my presentation on the Santa Rosa bus facility, and I'll be happy to answer any question the directors may have for this project or any other project described in my report.
Thank you, Ms. Bauer-Furbush. And I note that in the last two photos, we saw a partial answer to Mr. Rohde's public comments. Any of the directors with questions for Ms. Bauer-Furbush? I do see a couple now. I'm going to go left to right because that's how I'm seeing you, Director Hill. Would you go first and then Director Maston?
Yeah, just a quick question. Are you planning on using solar panels in that area, and is that infrastructure put in at the same time?
We have a limited area that we can manage, and definitely we will be looking into feasibility of installing the solar panels, and we basically have to determine which location would be feasible for such installation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Maston.
Yes, again, thank you for the visualizations. They're very helpful. Are we planning on installing any EV charging for the public at that location?
This will be done in conjunction with our review of the solar panel installation, because basically we want to make connection between the power supply and the availability of the power for the public.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be a great benefit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Maston and Ms. Bauer-Furbush. Anybody else with questions for Ms. Bauer-Furbush? I am seeing Madam Secretary. I'll lean on you again.
I see no other hands up.
Then thank you again, Ms. Bauer-Furbush. Madam Secretary, next item on the agenda, please.
We're going to move on to item 8 since there's no other reports under item 7. Item 8A is the report of the Building and Operating Committee of Thursday, September 22nd. The summary of recommendations for this meeting starts on page 55 of your packet. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. And as always, there was a discussion of these items at yesterday's committee meetings. Chair Garbarino, please begin your committee's report.
Thank you, President Terrio. And a special thanks to my colleagues for the thoughtful questions and discussion related to the suicide deterrent system. I think everyone agrees that this project is so very important, and the district and our communities feel the same, including the families like the Gamboas that we heard from this morning and all families who have been affected. And we are all committed to its completion. With that, the Building and Operating Committee is recommending approval of item 8A1 to approve funding through approximately December of 2023 and authorize the following actions relative to project number 1526, Golden Gate Bridge Physical Suicide Deterrent System Project. 2, 1, increase the project budget in the amount of $4,637,000. 2, execute the third amendment to Professional Services Agreement number 2018-B07, Golden Gate Bridge Physical Suicide Deterrent System and WIN Retrofit Construction Scheduling and Claim Review Services with Secretariat International of Manhattan Beach, California, in an amount not to exceed $1,542,000. 3, execute the third amendment to Professional Services Agreement number 2018-B084, Golden Gate Bridge Physical Suicide Deterrent Field Inspection Support Services with Summit Associates of Concord, California, in an amount not to exceed $2,127,000. And finally, 4, increase the fiscal year 2022-2023 Bridge Division capital budget for project number 1526 in the amount of $8,306,000 as concurred with by the Finance Auditing Committee and is detailed in the staff report, and I so move.
And so there is a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And there is a
Director
second.
Maston.
Very good, Director Maston. Madam Secretary, any board members that I'm not seeing who have questions or comments on this?
Not seeing any hands raised.
Then let's do a roll call vote.
Thank you. We're voting on item 8A1 with the first and second, starting with Director Arnold.
Aye.
Director Conroy.
Aye.
Director Garbarino.
Aye.
Director Giudice. Absent Director Grosball.
Aye.
Director Hernandez.
Aye.
Director Maston.
Aye.
Director Parr.
Aye.
Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Director Rodoni.
Aye.
Director Snyder.
Aye.
Director Stephanie.
Aye.
Director Thier.
Aye.
Second Vice President Hill.
Yes.
First Vice President Cochran.
Yes.
And President Terrio.
Yes,
Thank you. You have 15 ayes.
15-0, the motion passes. Chair Garbarino, on with your report, please.
Thank you. The Building and Operating Committee is also recommending approval of item 8A2 to approve award of sole source contract number 2022-F084, California Air Resources Board compliant Tier 4 diesel engines to Pacific Power Group of Kent, Washington, in the amount of $3,505,227 and authorize a contract contingency in the amount of $175,286 to cover unforeseen materials or services necessary to preserve and store the 4 engines as detailed in the staff report, and I so move.
So again, we have a motion. Do we again have a second?
Second.
Second.
There's a couple possible seconds there. Madam Secretary, are there any board members with questions or comments?
I see Director Parr has her hand up.
Oh, there it is. Yes, Director Parr, sorry.
Thank you. I really don't have a question other than what was the amount again? The amount that was written and the amount that I heard, I think were discrepant.
Sure. It was $3,505,727.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect.
She forgot the 56 cents. There's 56 cents in there too. Not really. Madam Secretary, if there are no other board members with hands up, let's do a roll call vote.
Thank you. We're voting on item 8A2 with the first and second, starting with Director Arnold.
Aye.
Director Conroy.
Aye.
Director Garbarino.
Aye.
Director Giudice is absent. Director Grosboll.
Aye.
Director Hernandez.
Aye.
Director Maston.
Aye.
Director Parr.
Aye.
Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Director Rodoni.
Aye.
Director Snyder.
Aye.
Director Stephanie.
Aye.
Director Thier.
Aye.
Second Vice President Hill.
Yes.
First Vice President Cochran.
Yes.
And President Terrio.
Yes,
Thank you. That's 15 ayes.
15 ayes, the motion passes. Chair Garbarino, do you have anything else for us?
Mr. President, that concludes my report today.
Nice work as usual. Thank you. Madam Secretary, the next item, please.
We're going to move on to item 8B, which is the report of the Finance Auditing Committee of Thursday, September 22nd. And that summary of recommendation for this meeting is on page 57 of your packet. I'll turn it back to you.
And again, members of the board, the action item in 8B1 was well discussed at yesterday's Finance Auditing Committee meeting. Before coming before you today, Chair Rabbit, your turn to report.
Thank you very much, President Terrio. The Finance Auditing Committee has only one item to recommend for approval today, and that is 8B1, to authorize the general manager to request that the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, or MTC, encumber $4,341,929 in revenue-based state transit assistance to MTC to support implementation of the Blue Ribbon Transit Transformation Action Plan, to allow for the disbursement and payment of $4,341,929 to MTC to implement the action plan as detailed in the staff report, and I so move.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Couple possible seconds. Any questions or comments from board members on this absolutely straightforward item? I'm glad you all agree. Madam Secretary, a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. We have a first and second on item 8B1, starting with Director Arnold.
Aye.
Director Conroy.
Aye.
Director Garbarino.
Aye.
Director Giudice is absent. Director Grosboll.
Aye.
Director Hernandez.
Aye.
Director Maston.
Aye.
Director Parr.
Aye.
Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Director Rodoni.
Aye.
Director Snyder.
Aye.
Director Stephanie.
Aye.
Director Thier.
Aye.
Second Vice President Hill.
Yes.
First Vice President Cochran.
Yes.
And President Terrio.
Yes.
Thank you. You have 15 ayes again.
15 ayes, it passes. Chair Rabbit, my script says to ask you if you have anything further to report, but you've already told us this is the only item you have. So I will just thank you and say, Madam Secretary, on to the next item on the agenda.
Thank you, President Terrio. There's no addresses to the board under item number 9. So I'm going to move on to item 10A relative to conducting remote meetings. I'm asking again for the board's approval to adopt a resolution to allow us to continue these remote meetings in accordance with Assembly Bill 361, with the understanding if nothing changes at the state level, then the board could consider it again at its next meeting on October 28th. Keeping in mind that AB 2449 was signed by the governor, and we are closely monitoring how that's going to affect us moving forward. There's good and there's bad news that's tied to it, but 361 does remain in effect until January 1st, 2024. AB 2449 is kind of layered on top of it, but that only stays in place if there's a state proclaimed state emergency. And once that gets lifted, there's another complicated set of rules that apply. So we're going to keep watching it at the state level, but until then, without that guidance, we'll continue these remote meetings again.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I will also remind the board that we voted to provide for provisional action in the event that something came up between meetings that commanded that we change our manner of meeting. So we're covered there. But are there questions or comments from board members on item 10A? I'm not seeing any, and Madam Secretary, I'm going to guess you're not as well.
That's correct.
Then may we have a motion to approve continuing our manner of remote meeting?
So moved, Rabbit.
President. Second, then. David's got it first.
Motions and seconds floating around out there. Madam Secretary, a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. We're voting on item 10A with a first and second, starting with Director Arnold,
Aye.
Director Conroy,
Aye.
Director Garbarino,
Aye.
Director Giudice is absent, Director Grosboll,
Aye.
Director Hernandez,
Aye.
Director Maston,
Aye.
Director Parr,
Aye.
Director Rabbit,
Aye.
Director Rodoni,
Aye.
Director Snyder,
Aye.
Director Stephanie,
Aye.
Director Thier,
Aye.
Second Vice President Hill,
Yes.
First Vice President Cochran,
Yes.
and President Terrio.
Yes,
Thank you, everyone. That's 15 ayes.
very good. Madam Secretary, the next item, please.
We're going to move on to item 10B, and that's the discussion and possible action to terminate the suspension of board procedural rules and policies for COVID-19 related emergency actions. Mr. Mulligan's brief staff report's on page 61, and he's available to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you. Are there board members with any questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, what I would look for is a motion to continue consideration of this item until a special order business at the next regular meeting of the board.
So moved, Parr.
And there is a motion. Is there a second?
Cochran.
Very good. Second, Cochran. Madam Secretary, a roll call vote again, please.
Thank you. This is item 10B with the first and second, starting with Director Arnold,
Aye.
Director Conroy,
Aye.
Director Garbarino,
Aye.
Director Giudice is absent, Director Grosboll,
Aye.
Director Hernandez,
Aye.
Director Maston,
Aye.
Director Parr,
Aye.
Director Rabbit,
Aye.
Director Rodoni,
Aye.
Director Snyder,
Aye.
Director Stephanie,
Aye.
Director Thier,
Aye.
Second Vice President Hill,
Yes.
First Vice President Cochran,
Yes.
and President Terrio.
Yes.
Thank you. You have unanimous vote there.
And so it again passes. We have, I'm told, no unfinished business and no new business to report. Item number 13 is communications. If you'd like a copy of them, please contact the district secretary's office. That brings us to the end of our agenda, and there are no further items to be presented to the board. Thanks to everyone for pitching in today. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move it, Judy Arnold.
There's a motion, and there was another voice there. We can take as a second, Madam Secretary. Is there any objection to adjourning? I see and hear none. So let us then adjourn today's meeting in memory of Robert Freeney, a retired laborer. Robert was with the district for 26 years prior to his retirement in September of 2016. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you, everyone. That concludes the meeting of the Board of Directors. Time is 11:04 a.m. See you next month.
All right.
Hi, everyone.
See you all.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
And those on the office, review of officers,